Hi, everyone. How's it going? I'm Bonnie Violet, trans, femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, digital chaplain.
I'm Pacey, trans, masked, non-binary, recovery, and mental health advocate.
And welcome to Trans Joy Boise podcast, where every story, laugh, and act of joy is a stand for our community. We'll get there.
We uplift bold voices, share real experiences, and celebrate trans lives thriving.
Tune in, connect, spread the joy. Because trans joy is unstoppable. Trans joy is so much better than me learning my words. Anyway, we'll get there.
Perfect. It's fantastic.
Oh my goodness.
And this week we have a guest with us, and we're really excited to have Nikson Mathews with us.
Yeah. I am not as polished on the intro for
Oh,
myself.
like we are.
You all just nailed that. So yeah, I'm Nikson. I use they, he pronouns, identify as genderqueer, transmasculine, and I'm really excited to be here. So, some of the background, we talked a little bit about, what do I do? So within the community, I am the state chair for the Idaho Democratic Queer Caucus. I am the policy and community advocate with Add the Words Idaho, so I've been doing some work there as well. I'm just trying to live my life and find some joy as a trans person in the state of Idaho. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we are so glad that you're here. You're like our first official guest on the podcast, and I think it's
I'm
so
honored.
perfect. Yeah, definitely one of the first people we thought of when we were thinking about who to have on the podcast.
I
So
appreciate that.
I think especially right now with it being the
Mm-hmm.
legislature.
Legislative
Where do my
session.
words go for this? What are we doing right now?
Today.
So, yeah, we're in the 2025 legislative session.
Yes.
So you were like basically
I
there.
was
You
getting
got it.
there.
You were right.
Yeah.
And everything is so unbelievably heavy right now.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to have, trans voices, not only, here to inform everybody, but in official government settings.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. Representation is so important, especially now. We need to be able to have people who have a say in the matters that are impacting their day-to-day lives. And these are the issues that impact us directly as LGBTQ folks, as trans folks. But we talk a lot about intersectionality and all of the issues that impact our lives. So that includes housing and education and healthcare and all of these things beyond just the really terrible bills
Mm-hmm.
that are trying to take away our rights as human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how many trans folks are kind of lobbying or actually at the state house right now?
That is a really good question.
Just to put you on the spot.
Well, I know I am. I know that there are like a few in different types of capacities.
Right.
Hardly any.
But there's not is there an organization there's no organization that really even focuses just on trans folks. Is that correct? Or is there?
Within the lobbying,
Mhm.
no. But usually it is like LGBTQ focus. So like the Idaho Democratic Queer Caucus, we're situated within the Democratic Party.
Mhm.
And so our work is partially legislative, and it's also partially within the party to bring in more representation and make sure, like, as a party itself is learning,
Mhm.
becoming informed, and then also like advocating and standing true to the democratic values that they espouse, right?
Mhm.
So as far as lobbying though, I know that there are people who do this work. I don't know if there's any other registered lobbyists who are trans. And I'm so sorry
If we're missing,
if I am missing
Yeah.
anybody, because there are trans people involved in the work, but in terms
right, yeah,
it's minimal, and it absolutely should be more.
yeah.
What about with things changing? Like, it seems like trans and non-binary folks are just being completely erased by this administration. So I worry because I look at you and I think that there are so many folks right now that are feeling completely helpless.
Yeah.
And they see someone like you that is actually in a position, or with people that are in the position to actually make change. And I think that the erasure of, us is going to kind of eliminate that source of hope.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. And that's what is hard, right? Because, we see with the executive orders that Trump has signed, and I was recounting and going through as best I could this morning, which is a depressing way to spend a morning.
Right.
I think there's 11, maybe more that I'm missing that either directly target LGBTQ folks. Let's be honest, primarily trans folks, and that just goes down to trans women of color, etc. Right? 11, I think, maybe more.
Yeah.
But Idaho has, or 10, I think is what it is. Idaho has 11 bills that have been introduced targeting the LGBTQ community, and it follows the same line, primarily trans folks. Right? And so we're seeing this massive influx of anti-LGBTQ, anti-trans legislation that is terrifying. Yeah. And it is all meant to erase us.
Right.
Literally, we passed a sex and gender bill last year in Idaho that makes sex and gender a synonym, right? So effectively, we lose our identity in Idaho statute. Well, this year, Trump signed an executive order doing the same thing. So it's
on a national level.
On a national level. So we're ahead of the game on this one.
Yeah.
I
Good
say.
old Idaho.
Yeah.
Good old Idaho.
Good old Idaho. We're finally, usually, we're so far behind, but, in this, we're ahead.
And what other, can you speak to some of those bills? I know I saw you give testimony on a medical kind of where folks could choose not to serve a person because of their own personal beliefs in like a hospital setting or.
Yeah. So that's called the Medical Defense Act. I can't remember the number right off the top of my head. Yeah. But essentially what it does is it allows healthcare providers, everything from a doctor to an insurer, to deny care based on personally held religious beliefs. Now, when the sponsor of the bill, who is Skog, Bruce Skog, came forward and he talked about this bill, and all the people who testified, it was really clear this is about gender affirming care. They talked about vaccines and vaccinations, they talked about abortion, but primarily it was, I'm a doctor, I'm a healthcare provider, and I don't want to provide gender affirming care. Don't make me do that.
Got you.
This is like particularly dangerous, and I think is a really good example. Like this kind of legislation isn't just harmful to trans folks, even though it is clearly directed. You grow up in I grew up in a town of 250 people. You come from a small community. You have one doctor, and they say, "I don't want to provide you care." What is that person left to do?
Yeah.
And so this impacts everybody, and it's absolutely unethical. And so that's one example.
And is that happening at a national level too? Because I thought I was reading something recently through the ACLU that was also talking about how some folks maybe would go to like a neighboring state to receive care or whatever, but even that is potentially going to be blocked in some way. Or is it a state to state kind of situation?
So right now, my understanding is it's state to state. That does not mean it couldn't change, but you've got like Washington State, who is like doubling down on protecting trans rights, access to abortion, access to all of these good kinds of care. I was literally just like scanning through some of the legislation that Washington State is introducing. And I'm like, we could be like actually taking care of people. How beautiful.
Right.